Board organization can feel like plumbing, invisible when it works, impossible to ignore when it doesn't. But the way a board structures its committees, meetings, and information flow often determines whether it's actually shaping strategy or just reacting to it. With our final guest, Renee Hornbaker, Director and Finance Committee Chair of Eastman Chemical Company, we're asking what proper organization really means, which structural elements matter most, how boards should rethink committee design and oversight models as risks like AI, cybersecurity, and activism evolve, and what the warning signs look like when a board has become too fragmented or too compliance focused to see the big picture. Renee, why is proper organization so important for a board?
Well, Bill, I think we've all been in meetings that take too long. Nobody's sure what the purpose of the meeting is. You don't get to the important topics. Decisions aren't made that are supposed to be made. And so good organization helps overcome all that. And first of all, it's respect for the people's time. On a board, you've got an experienced group of leaders, successful people that bring their experience and their judgment to the company. And you need to be respectful of their time. And so when materials arrive too late or they're too dense, I mean, you get a 355-page deck the day before a meeting is not practical for directors to really study the materials and then think about it and digest and formulate their questions. So it just is important to have good materials. And then also, you don't want the important items on the agenda overlooked because you run out of time. Many times I've been in meetings where directors are running for planes to catch, etc., and we haven't even gotten to strategic discussions, which were the most important part of the discussion. So if you have good organization, you put those further on the agenda. You have time allocated items on the agenda, and that really drives, again, more strategic decision time. If you're not pressed for time, then you can have the discussions and the strategy and really think about the future of the company and weigh in with your inputs. And then when you have materials that are just talked to you, they read the slides, it's not effective. Directors theoretically get the materials to pre-read. The discussion should be more about what are the key points of this section and what information or decision do we need from you, and then what questions do you have? And it really fosters more strategic thinking on the part of management and boards to have time for that white space of discussion instead of, as we've all seen, death by PowerPoint. And so fewer slides are better, and that helps. In addition, good organization can help ensure that everyone has a voice. If you're pressed for time, again, or you're not structured, one or two people can dominate a conversation, and it may not be the right answer, but they're dominating the conversation. And what you want to do is prevent groupthink. And that happens, again, when you don't have really structured conversations.
What elements of board organization, committee design, meeting cadence, leadership roles most often determine whether a board operates strategically rather than reactively?
They're all important. When I think about it, I think the cadence is really one of the more important things. For example, how things are structured on the agenda, how the timing is allocated to different topics. That's really important. If strategy gets 15 minutes on an overcrowded agenda, that's not appropriate. So it's the cadence of the meeting, it's the time allotment, and then I think also it's the leadership, the chair of the meeting, really keeping things on track, making sure that the discussion doesn't go down rabbit holes and you spend all your time on these rabbit holes that are not totally germane to the conversation. I've seen a good chair say, those are really good points, but let's table that for another discussion or for another day. Let's drive back to what this discussion was all about. And that reduces the amount of time that's spent, I don't want to say frivolously, but not germane to the subject that we're discussing. And it really makes a big difference. And it also can be used, leadership can be used to ensure that everyone has a voice. I've seen good leadership also. Either if somebody hasn't had something to say, Mary, what did you think about that topic? I know you've got experience in this area. What are your suggestions? Or even doing a round robin to get everybody's input, although sometimes that can contribute to groupthink if the first one or two people have an opinion and then everybody just piles on. So you want to avoid that as well. I think also, it's just very important to keep things on track. And leadership is a very big part of that, to make sure that things are also at a high enough level and not, just drilling down too deep on things that may not be critical to the decisions. For example, I've seen where directors can get into details, asking questions about this operation metric or that operation metric, and things that they may have been interested in their career and they were really interested in. But what happens is that gets the conversation off track. So a good leader, again, will say, I'll talk with you about that offline. That's really important consideration. But for right now, let's just keep things focused on what the subject is here right now. And so leadership good leadership is very valuable.
How should directors think about whether their current committee structure and oversight model still fit emerging realities like AI, cybersecurity, geopolitics, and activist pressure?
Committee structure is something that I think all boards are struggling with today because there's so much new that needs to be embedded within the structure of the board conversations. I know some boards have gone to separate technology committees to focus on AI and cyber. And other boards feel it's very important that be woven into the full board discussion and elevated there. I think the committees obviously have the capacity to go deep. And there's some benefit to having, for example, a technology committee that can go deep. But on the other hand, directors shouldn't try to go too deep. They're there for oversight and strategic decision making, not to drill down, has this control been performed? And so I think, it's important to have good charters and allocate the work of the board to the various committees and to the full board based on the charters. One of the things that can happen is if you don't have good charters, things can fall through the cracks. Nobody's addressing that topic. I think that came, when AI first became an issue or something of really to the forefront, some boards didn't really get into the topic because it wasn't added to a charter or even discussed about where that discussion might take place. So charters are very important, and it's important to revise them every year because there's new, as you mentioned, there's new things coming up. For example, AI. And also, there are things that cut across committees. For example, AI, talent, those are things that cut across committees. And so making sure that there's someone focusing on it, but then it's elevated to the full board. The committees, though, can go deeper into some of these areas and get more insights. And I think that's where it's really important to make sure that you've got structures in place that the full board is really aware of what the committee work is doing. When I think about geopolitics, that's woven into every phase of a company's operations, and the full board and the various committees. Geopolitics certainly can affect talent, it affects strategy. So geopolitics is typically a full board matter. I think the question is, are these risks existential risks, or are there risks that really integrate with each other? For example, geopolitics and supply chain risk, or AI and cyber. Those things have many different aspects, but they integrate with one another, so that you want to make sure that the company is thinking about things in an integrated way. And I would say that, the board aligning around where things sit and being fully apprised of what is being discussed, I think is really most important.
What are the warning signs that a board structure has become too fragmented, too committee driven, or too compliance oriented to effectively oversee long term strategy and risk?
I think there have been some public examples where committees didn't effectively communicate and coordinate across the committees. So certainly committee silos is one area where is a risk if a committee is operating without considering how the work touches on other committees and how the full board might need to be integrated with it. And that gets to also what I would say are weak or performative readouts. You have committee reports, and I've seen committee reports take 10 or 15 minutes, and I've seen them take 2 or 3. And I think somewhere in between is a good starting place. Depends on the work of the committee and what the issues are. But I think a 2 or 3 minute report out is not adequate to really cover the substance of the meeting, not just we discussed this, and this, but we discussed this, and this is how we thought about it. This is the outcome. This is the follow-up. And so it's really having really strong report outs. Also, another warning sign is when compliance dominates the agenda. It's all about compliance instead of, the strategic considerations or issues. And I would say also another warning sign is reduced engagement and debate. If there's not discussion in a board about the various issues that are coming up in these really important geopolitical issues, AI, all of the things that are transforming companies today and how they do business, then there's not, that's a warning sign, because risk siloed into a particular committee instead of a bigger picture.
What does a well organized board actually look like in practice?
The best I've seen is when it starts with a couple things. First of all, there's an annual planning calendar that lays out all the meetings for the year and what the key topics will be discussed at each meeting. And that covers certainly compliance matters, because those continue every year. There's certain things that you do every year to approve the annual budget and the capital plan. There's things required for reporting. And you lay all those out on a calendar for the board and each committee. And then you can look at and see, is there something missing when a chair, lead director, and chair of NomGov needs to look at all those planning calendars and see, are they aligned? Is there something missing? And then there needs to be room on the planning calendar when next step is to take that as a guideline for the meeting. And so for the meeting, what are the new and emerging issues? What are the strategic decisions and things we need to make, and make sure that those are added to the agenda for the meeting, and that the agenda are sort of time allocated, so that you expect this discussion to take 20 minutes or this one to take 45, so that it gives whoever is chairing that meeting an opportunity to coordinate better. If you're halfway through a meeting and you've only gotten through the first item that was supposed to take 20 minutes, you're in trouble. So a good chair then can bring the meeting back into alignment by having a good time allocated agenda. If things start running long, sometimes they need to run long. Sometimes some things come up that wasn't anticipated and that really needs to be discussed. But then a chair can figure out, are there things later in the agenda that may have less strategic importance that we can cover by you've read the materials, and can we take it as read, or are there discussion comments? And that can shorten the latter part of the meeting, as long as you have the strategic items up front. The other thing is that materials are distributed in advance, and hopefully they're complete. I've seen where materials come out and the next day more materials are added or pages are substituted, and it's very difficult for a director to figure out what to do and how to allocate their time. And sometimes I've seen where materials get updated the night before the day of the meeting, and it's just not good for a director to be able to contribute properly. So delivered in advance and clear and concise, not 350 pages, not 650 pages. I've seen materials that are just way too long. Now, if you have a public document that has to be reviewed as part of that may be different, but other things should be short and concise and really focused on the key points or key background information that a director needs to have to make a decision or to weigh in on the discussion. And then discussion-focused meetings, not slides. As chair, I've always tried to make the presenters have 2 or 3 talking points. Don't read from the slides, but what are the most important information you want to convey? We've read the materials, but what do you think is really important that we focus on? And then open it up for questions and discussion, so that there's a lot more time for discussion instead of just reading the slides during a meeting. And then active chair facilitation, as I mentioned, to be able to make sure that things are kept on track and that everyone has a voice. Really, really important for everyone to be able to have a voice and not feel intimidated or drowned out by maybe the loudest voice. So it's good facilitation and active and time discipline to make sure that things are staying on track. And in my opinion, a well-organized board feels focused and more strategic. And I would say that the organization really helps board's effectiveness. So by designing in the organization, that really helps the board be more effective and contribute to the success of the company in a more meaningful way and deeper, thoughtful way.